I still remember the moment as if it had just happened. I was standing at the hostess stand of La Valette, one of the city's most exclusive rooftop restaurants, clutching my clutch as the maitre d' scanned his tablet. "I'm sorry, madame," he said, barely glancing at me before shaking his head, "but there's no reservation under your name." I blinked, thrown off. That's impossible. I was invited to dinner with my fiancé's family. They should already be here. He offered a polite but firm smile. "I just checked. There's a reservation for 5 under Eleanor Whitmore, but I'm afraid—" A sharp, familiar voice sliced through the air. "Oh." "Serena!" Eleanor's voice dripped with mock pity. "Did you really think we'd have a seat for you tonight?" I turned to see my future mother-in-law standing a few feet away, her emerald green dress catching the soft glow of the chandeliers. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant updo, and her smile was a blade wrapped in silk. Seated behind her at a camelette table, my fiancé James sat rigid, his eyes fixed on his water glass. His older brother, Marcus, and Marcus's wife, Lydia, exchanged amused glances, their wine glasses glinting as they leaned closer to whisper. I felt a knot tighten in my chest, but I refused to let it show. "I don't understand," I said, keeping my voice steady. Eleanor's smile widened, predatory. "Oh, darling, I didn't think you'd actually show up." She chuckled, as if my presence were a delightful joke. "This is a family dinner. A place like La Valette is, well, a bit above your usual, isn't it? Perhaps a diner would be more your speed." Marcus let out a snort, quickly masked as a cough. Lydia's lips twitched, and James just sat there, his knuckles whitening around his glass. The humiliation stung, sharp and cold, as the eyes of nearby diners flicked toward us, their curiosity palpable. I should have expected this. For 2 years, Eleanor had made it clear I didn't belong in her world. I wasn't born into wealth like she was. I didn't grow up in sprawling estates or attend Ivy League schools. I was the daughter of a teacher and a mechanic, and to Eleanor, that made me an interloper. The shame should have crushed me, but instead, something inside me steadied. I smiled a slow, deliberate curve of my lips that made Eleanor's expression flicker. "Is that so?" I said, turning to the maitre d'. "Would you mind asking the manager to step out for a moment?" Eleanor laughed, sharp and dismissive. "Oh, please, Serena. Do you think the manager of La Valette is going to drop everything for you?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "Yes," I said, my voice calm, because the manager knows me very well. Her smirk didn't fade, but a shadow of uncertainty crossed her eyes. Eleanor had spent years trying to diminish me, but tonight, she'd escalated her game into public humiliation. And she'd done it in front of James, his family, and a room full of strangers. The air crackled with tension as I held my ground, refusing to let her win. The maitre d' hesitated, glancing between me and Eleanor, clearly unsure whether to indulge my request. Before he could decide, a warm voice broke through. "Serena!" I turned to see Camille Torres, La Valette's manager, striding toward us. In her late 40s, Camille was a vision of poised dark hair, pulled into a sleek bun, her tailored blazer accentuating her confident stride. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, and she crossed the room with a smile that radiated warmth. "Camille," I said, my own smile widening. "It's been too long." Eleanor's expression faltered as Camille reached us, her gaze sweeping over the Whitmore table with polite curiosity before settling back on me. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone light but edged with concern. I gestured toward the table, keeping my voice even. "It seems I wasn't included in the reservation. A bit of a mix-up, apparently." Camille's eyes narrowed slightly, catching the undercurrent in my words. She turned to Eleanor, her smile professional but cool. "I see. Mrs. Whitmore, is there an issue with the reservation?" Eleanor scoffed, crossing her arms. "No issue at all. This was meant to be a private family dinner. Serena must have misunderstood." Marcus smirked, and Lydia sipped her wine, her eyes gleaming with amusement. James shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. I felt the weight of their judgment, but Camille's presence grounded me. Misunderstood, Camille repeated, her tone deceptively mild. She turned to me, her smile softening. Serena, you know you're always welcome here. Eleanor's jaw tightened. This is absurd. La Valette doesn't just accommodate uninvited guests. Camille's expression remained serene. Mrs. Whitmore, Serena isn't an uninvited guest. She's practically family. The table froze. Marcus's smirk vanished. Lydia's glass paused midair, and James's eyes finally met mine, wide with surprise. Eleanor let out a disbelieving laugh. Family, you must be joking. She's my son's fiancée, and I assure you, she has no connection to… Actually, I interrupted, my voice smooth. Camille and I go way back. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. How? I leaned forward slightly, my voice carrying just enough for the nearby tables to hear. Before I met James, I worked in event planning. Camille was my mentor. She taught me everything I know about managing high-profile venues like this one. A stunned silence fell over the table. Eleanor opened her mouth, but Camille spoke first, her tone warm but firm. Serena was exceptional. She coordinated some of our biggest events, charity galas, corporate launches. She has a gift for making people feel valued, which is why La Valette still calls her for advice. Eleanor's face reddened, her carefully constructed narrative unraveling. I turned to the maitre d', who was watching with wide eyes. I assume Camille's word is enough to find me a seat? He nodded quickly. Of course, Miss Serena. I'll have a place set immediately. As a waiter hurried to add a chair next to James, Eleanor's fingers clenched around her clutch. This is ridiculous, she hissed. You're telling me she gets a seat because she used to plan parties? Camille smiled unfazed. She gets a seat because she's earned it, and because I say so. I slid into the chair, my movements deliberate, and met Eleanor's gaze. Looks like there's room after all, I said, my voice light but pointed. Eleanor's nostrils flared, but she was trapped. The other diners were watching, and she couldn't afford to make a scene. Camille patted my shoulder. I'll have the chef send over something special, Serena, on the house. As she walked away, I picked up my fork, the weight of Eleanor's fury palpable across the table. James reached for his drink, his expression unreadable. Marcus and Lydia exchanged uneasy glances, and for the first time, I felt the balance of power shift. This dinner was just beginning, and Eleanor Whitmore was about to learn that underestimating me was a dangerous mistake. The waiter placed a delicate amuse-bouche in front of me, a complimentary offering from the chef. I took a bite, savoring the burst of flavor and the tense silence that enveloped the table. Eleanor's face was a mask of barely contained rage, her lips pressed into a thin line. Marcus cleared his throat, attempting to steer the conversation to safer ground. So, James, how's the new project going? James mumbled something vague about deadlines, his eyes darting between me and his mother. Eleanor seized the opportunity to regain control. Yes, James has been working tirelessly, she said, her voice saccharine. It's a shame some people don't understand the demands of real ambition. The job was unmistakable. Lydia smirked, and Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I set my fork down, meeting Eleanor's gaze. Ambition? I said, my tone light. I'd say coordinating events for Fortune 500 companies takes a fair bit of it, wouldn't you? Eleanor's smile tightened. Oh, I'm sure it was demanding in its own way. But managing a few parties hardly compares to running a family empire. Marcus coughed, and Lydia's smirk faded. James gripped his glass, his silence deafening. I leaned back, crossing my arms. You'd be surprised, Eleanor? Organizing a gala for 300 guest CEOs, politicians, you name it, requires strategy, precision, and the ability to handle egos. Sound familiar? Her eyes flashed, but she didn't respond. The table was a battlefield, and I wasn't backing down. Eleanor took a slow sip of her wine, composing herself. How quaint, she said finally. But let's be honest, Serena. You're here because of James. Without him, you'd still be fetching coffee for event planners. The words were meant to wound, to remind me of my place. Marcus and Lydia watched, waiting for me to crumble. James flinched, but said nothing. I laughed softly, the sound catching Eleanor off guard. Is that what you think? I said, tilting my head. That James is my ticket to this world? Eleanor's smile was venomous. Isn't he? You're a smart girl, Serena. But let's not pretend you'd be sitting here without my son's name. I set my glass down, my movements deliberate. Eleanor, I was sitting at tables like this long before I met James. The difference is, I earned my place. I didn't inherit it. A sharp silence fell. Marcus's jaw dropped slightly, and Lydia's eyes widened. James looked like he wanted to disappear. Eleanor's knuckles whitened around her glass. Excuse me, she said, her voice low. You heard me, I said, my voice steady. I built my career from nothing. No trust funds, no family connections, just hard work. Can you say the same? The table was deathly still. Eleanor's face flushed, her composure cracking. She'd spent years painting me as an opportunist. But now, in front of her family and a room full of onlookers, I was dismantling her narrative. And she hated it. You're out of line, she snapped, her voice rising just enough to draw attention from nearby tables. Am I? I said, leaning forward. Or are you just upset because I'm not the easy target you thought I was? Eleanor opened her mouth, but before she could retort, James finally spoke. Serena, maybe we should. No, James, I said, cutting him off, my eyes still on Eleanor. We're done pretending everything's fine. The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Eleanor's gaze darted to James, expecting him to rein me in, but he just stared at his plate, spineless as ever. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes, not just about me, but about her son. The main course arrived, but the mood at the table was anything but celebratory. Eleanor tried to steer the conversation to neutral topics, art auctions, charity events, but her usual confidence was frayed. Marcus and Lydia picked at their food, casting wary glances between us. James remained silent, his discomfort palpable. I took a bite of my dish, a perfectly seared scallop, and decided it was time to push harder. Eleanor, I said, setting my fork down, why go to all this trouble? Booking a table, leaving me off the reservation, making a scene. What was the point? She stiffened, her fork pausing Madeira. I don't know what you're talking about, don't you? I said, my voice calm, but pointed. This wasn't an oversight. You planned this to humiliate me, to remind me I don't belong. Marcus coughed, and Lydia's eyes darted to Eleanor, who forced a laugh. You're being dramatic, Serena. I simply forgot to include you. It happens. Does it? I said, tilting my head. Like when you forgot to invite me to the family's holiday party last year, or when you forgot to mention the engagement dinner until I showed up and found out I wasn't expected? Eleanor's smile vanished. James shifted, his voice low. Serena, let's not do this here. I turned to him, my gaze steady. Why not, James? Your mother's been doing this to me for years, and you've never said a word. Why start now? He flinched, his face paling. Eleanor seized the opportunity. You see? She said, her voice sharp. This is exactly why you don't fit in. You're too confrontational. Our family values discretion. Discretion? I said, laughing softly. Is that what you call humiliating your son's fiancée in public? The nearby tables were openly watching now, their whispers a soft hum in the background. Eleanor's face reddened, but she pressed on. You're twisting this, Serena. You're here because of James's generosity. Without him, you'd be nowhere. The words were a dagger, meant to cut deep. I leaned forward, my voice low and deliberate. Generosity? Eleanor, do you know who funded James's startup? The table froze. Marcus's fork clattered against his plate. Lydia's eyes widened, and James's head snapped up, panic flickering in his gaze. Eleanor's smile faltered. What are you talking about? I smiled, slow and deliberate. James's tech startup, the one you're so proud of? It wasn't his trust fund that got it off the ground. It was my savings, my investments, my connections. A stunned silence fell. Eleanor's eyes darted to James, who looked like he'd been punched. That's not true, she said, but her voice wavered. Oh, it's true, I said, my voice calm. I spent years building a network in event planning CEOs, investors, venture capitalists. When James needed funding, I introduced him to the right people. I put up half the capital myself. Marcos let out a low whistle. Lydia stared at James, her amusement replaced by shock. Eleanor's face was a mask of fury. You're lying, she hissed. Am I said. Pull my phone from my clutch. I opened a photo of a contract signed by me and James, detailing my investment in his company, and held it up. This is the agreement, dated 3 years ago. Care to read it? Eleanor's eyes widened, her composure shattering. James's voice was barely a whisper. Serena, please. I ignored him, my gaze locked on Eleanor. You've spent years trying to make me feel small, but the truth is, your son's success depends on me. Without my money, my network, my work, he'd be nothing. The words landed like a thunderclap. Eleanor's hand shook, and James looked like he might be sick. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not just of me, but of the realization that her perfect son wasn't who she thought he was. The dessert course arrived, but no one touched it. The tension at the table was suffocating. The other diners' whispers now a steady hum. Eleanor tried to regain control, her voice tight. This is a family matter, she said, forcing a smile. We'll discuss it privately. There's nothing private about this, I said, my voice firm. You made it public when you humiliated me in front of everyone. Now you get to deal with the consequences. James finally spoke, his voice strained. Serena, can we talk? Alone. I turned to him, my expression cold. You had 2 years to talk, James. Every time your mother insulted me, excluded me, belittled me, you stayed silent. Why should I listen now? He flinched, his eyes pleading. I didn't know she'd do this, I swear. Didn't you? I said, my voice cutting. You knew exactly who she was. You knew how she treated me, and you let it happen. Eleanor's voice was sharp. Don't you dare blame my son. You're the one causing a scene. I laughed, the sound bitter. A scene? Eleanor, you orchestrated this entire evening to humiliate me. You booked this table, left me off the reservation, and made sure everyone saw it. This is your scene. Her face flushed, but she didn't deny it. Marcus and Lydia sat frozen, their earlier amusement gone. James reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Serena, please, he said. I love you. We can fix this. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth I'd been avoiding. James wasn't a partner. He was a bystander, content to let his mother's cruelty slide as long as it didn't disrupt his comfortable life. There's nothing to fix, I said, my voice steady. I'm done. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. You think you can just walk away? You'll regret this, Serena. You'll be nothing without James. I stood, smoothing my dress. That's where you're wrong, Eleanor. I was something long before James, and I'll be something long after. I turned to Camille, who'd been watching from a distance. Thank you for everything, Camille. It was good to see you. She nodded, a knowing smile on her lips. Always Serena. As I walked out, the weight of their stares followed me, but I didn't care. The night air was crisp, and for the first time in years, I felt free. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into a hotel, my phone buzzing with missed calls from James and a single venomous voicemail from Eleanor. You'll pay for this, Serena. You're nothing but a scheming opportunist. I deleted it without a second thought. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Vanessa, at her sleek downtown office. I won out, I said, sliding a folder across her desk. The engagement, the relationship, everything. Vanessa scanned the documents, my investment contracts, emails, financial records. You've got a strong case, she said, her eyes gleaming. James's startup is heavily tied to your capital. You could walk away with a significant stake. I don't want a stake, I said. I want control. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Control? I nodded. I invested the seed money. I introduced him to his investors. I built the foundation. I want the company, or at least enough to make sure he and Eleanor can't touch it. She smiled, impressed. That's bold, but we can make it happen. Over the next week, I worked with Vanessa to draft a proposal. I'd reclaim my investment plus interest and demand a controlling share of James's startup. If he refused, I'd take him to court where the contracts would speak for themselves. I also reached out to my old contacts and event planning CEOs, investors, industry leaders who were more than happy to back me. Eleanor had underestimated my network, and that was her fatal mistake. James called repeatedly, begging to talk, but I ignored him. Finally, he showed up at the hotel, his face haggard. "Serena, please," he said, his voice breaking. "I messed up. I should have stood up for you. Let's work this out." I looked at him, feeling nothing but clarity. "You made your choice, James. You chose your mother over me every time. I'm done being your collateral damage." His eyes widened. "What about the company? You can't just—" "Oh, I can," I said, cutting him off. "Check your email. My lawyer sent you a proposal. Sign it, or we'll see you in court." He paled, realizing I wasn't bluffing. "Serena, this will ruin me." "No," I said, my voice cold. "You ruined yourself." 2 months later, I sat in my new office, a sleek space overlooking the city skyline. The startup, now rebranded as Horizon Events, was mine. James had signed over control rather than face a public legal battle, and my old contacts had flooded the company with new contracts. Eleanor tried to intervene, calling in favors and spreading rumors, but my reputation in the industry was ironclad. She was a fading aristocrat. I was a rising star. My phone buzzed with a message from Camille. "Dinner at La Valette tonight?" My treat. I smiled, typing back. "Absolutely." As I leaned back in my chair, a glass of sparkling water in hand, I thought about that night at La Valette. Eleanor had tried to break me to prove I didn't belong, but in doing so, she'd shown me my own strength. I wasn't just Serena, the mechanic's daughter. I was Serena, the woman who'd built a career, a network, a future, and no one, not Eleanor, not James, could take that away. I stood, grabbing my coat, and headed out into the evening. The city lights stretched before me, bright and endless, and for the first time in years, I knew exactly where I was going.